Rejected by her village, Samantha lives alone in the mountains until a warrior named Ethan arrives with his sick daughter as she saves the child. Their bond sparks outrage, but can love overcome hatred? This is the story of a woman who defied intolerance to heal a broken community. Hey there, thanks for being here. Leave a like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what you think of the story. Let's keep going. The wind cut through the arid northern mountains with a coldness that penetrated to the bone. Samantha Parker adjusted the woolen shawl over her shoulders as she walked along the rocky trail that led to her cabin. Her calloused hands held a bundle of medicinal herbs she had collected during the morning: sage, echinacea, and some roots her grandmother had taught her to identify years ago. The small village of Pine Ridge stretched out in the valley below, its chimneys releasing thin columns of white smoke against the gray October sky. From up here, it looked peaceful, almost welcoming. But Samantha knew the truth behind the tranquil facade. Damn half-breed, Mrs. Henderson had muttered the previous morning. When she passed by the general store, the words still echoed in her mind, mingled with the painful memories of Jacob, her son who had never lived to see 2 months. She stopped before the weathered wooden door of her cabin. The structure had belonged to her grandmother, a respected healer who knew the secrets of plants and the ancient prayers in the native tongue. Now, only Samantha remained to keep the tradition alive. The silence of the mountains enveloped her, like a familiar embrace, yet also lonely. It was all she had left: the herbs, the memories, and the quiet resistance of a people who refused to see her as belonging anywhere. 3 days later, as the autumn sun cast long shadows across the mountainside, Samantha was grinding willow bark in her wooden mortar when she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Heavy, deliberate steps that didn't belong to any of the occasional visitors from Pine Ridge. Those came with hesitation, reluctance, and whispered complaints. She set down the pestle and moved to the small window. Through the glass, she saw a tall figure approaching her cabin, a native man with long black hair tied back, wearing traditional buckskin clothing mixed with modern boots. But what made her heart skip was the small bundle he carried in his arms, a child wrapped in a faded blanket. Samantha's breath caught. The man's face was etched with desperation, his dark eyes scanning her cabin as if searching for salvation. She recognized something in his expression, the same raw panic she had felt when Jacob grew weak and fevered in her arms. Before he could knock, she opened the door. "Please," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "My daughter. She's very sick." Up close, Samantha could see the child's pallid face, the way her small chest rose and fell in labored breaths. The girl couldn't have been more than 3 years old, her dark hair matted with sweat, her lips cracked from dehydration. "I'm Ethan Blackhawk," he continued, shifting the child gently in his arms. "I've traveled 2 days to find you. They say you're a healer, like your grandmother was." Samantha felt something stir within her, a mixture of maternal instinct and professional duty that she thought had died with Jacob. She stepped aside without hesitation. "Bring her in." The interior of the cabin was filled with the scent of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. Ethan looked around, taking in the rows of glass jars containing various remedies, the bundles of sage and sweetgrass, the small altar where Samantha's grandmother used to pray. "Lay her on the bed," Samantha instructed, moving quickly to gather supplies. She could see the child's symptoms clearly now: severe dehydration, high fever, and signs of exhaustion that spoke of a long illness. As Ethan gently placed his daughter on the quilt-covered bed, the little girl's eyes fluttered open briefly. They were the same dark brown as her father's, but clouded with sickness. "Lily," Ethan whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, "we're going to make you better." Samantha's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the child's pulse, feeling for fever. But when she pressed her ear to the girl's chest to listen to her breathing, something unexpected happened. A warm sensation spread through her body, her breasts, still tender from the milk that had never fully dried since Jacob's death, began to respond to the proximity of this sick child. "She needs fluids immediately," Samantha said, her voice steady despite the emotional storm brewing inside her, "and she's severely malnourished." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Her mother died in childbirth. I've done my best." But he trailed off, the weight of single parenthood evident in his weathered features. Without another word, Samantha made a decision that would change everything. She looked at Ethan, then at the dying child on her bed, and felt her grandmother's spirit guiding her hands. "I can help her," she said quietly, "but you need to trust me completely." Ethan met her eyes, and in that moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. To people who had lost everything, finding hope in the most unlikely place. The night stretched long and silent around the cabin as Samantha worked tirelessly to save Lily's life. She had prepared herbal teas to bring down the fever, applied cool compresses to the child's burning forehead, and administered small spoonfuls of medicinal broth. But the little girl remained weak, her breathing shallow, and labored. Ethan sat in the wooden chair beside the bed, his large hands clasped tightly together. He hadn't spoken much since arriving, but his eyes never left his daughter's face. Every few minutes, he would reach out to touch her hand, as if reassuring himself she was still alive. "She's not getting stronger," he finally whispered, his voice breaking. Samantha paused in her preparation of another herbal remedy. She could feel it too. Despite all her efforts, Lily was fading. The child needed something more than medicine could provide. She needed nourishment that no herb could give. The realization hit Samantha like a physical blow. Her body knew what the child needed before her mind fully grasped it. The heaviness in her breasts, the instinctive pull she felt toward this dying child. It was the same biological response she'd experienced with Jacob, but this time, there was a child who could benefit from it. "Ethan," she said softly, turning to face him, "there's something I need to tell you." He looked up, hope and desperation warring in his dark eyes. "I lost my son 3 months ago," Samantha continued, her voice steady despite the pain. He was about her age when he died. My body, it still remembers him." Understanding dawned slowly across Ethan's face. He glanced at Lily, then back at Samantha, processing what she was offering. "You would do that?" he asked, his voice barely audible, "for a stranger's child?" Samantha moved closer to the bed, her hand hovering over Lily's fevered forehead. "She's not a stranger," she said simply. "She's a child who needs a mother's care." Without waiting for his response, Samantha gently lifted Lily from the bed. The little girl was so light, so fragile, that it broke something deep inside Samantha's chest. She settled into the rocking chair by the fireplace, cradling Lily against her. "Come to me, little one," she whispered in her grandmother's language, the ancient words flowing naturally from her lips. Lily's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Samantha's face. There was no fear there, only a deep, primal recognition. The look of a child finding safety after a long, frightening journey. As Samantha guided the child to her breast, she felt tears streaming down her cheeks. This was what she had dreamed of during those dark nights after Jacob's death, the chance to nurture, to give life instead of mourning it. Lily latched on weakly at first, then with growing strength as her body responded to the nourishment it desperately needed. Ethan remained motionless in his chair, watching the sacred moment unfold. His own eyes were wet with tears as he witnessed a stranger offering the most intimate gift a woman could give, the sustenance of her own body to save his child's life. "Thank you," he whispered, the words carrying more weight than any prayer he'd ever spoken. Samantha looked up at him, Lily still cradled against her chest. "We're going to save her," she said with quiet certainty, "together." As the fire crackled softly in the hearth and the mountain wind whispered through the pines, outside, 3 souls found each other in the darkness. A father who had carried his grief alone, a woman who had lost her purpose, and a child who became the bridge between their broken hearts. Over the next 3 days, Lily's condition slowly improved, color returned to her cheeks, her breathing became steady, and she began to respond to Samantha's gentle touch with small smiles. Ethan rarely left the cabin, helping with simple tasks while maintaining a respectful distance from the intimate care Samantha provided his daughter. On the fourth morning, as Samantha prepared breakfast, she noticed movement in the valley below. 3 figures on horseback were making their way up the mountain trail toward her cabin. Her stomach tightened as she recognized the lead rider, Robert Miller, Pine Ridge's self-appointed leader, flanked by 2 of his most loyal followers. "We have visitors," she told Ethan quietly. Nodding toward the window, Ethan joined her at the glass, his expression hardening as he took in the approaching men. "They don't look friendly." "They're not." Samantha wiped her hands on her apron, steeling herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. "Robert Miller has been trying to drive me out of these mountains for years. Now he has an excuse." The riders dismounted outside the cabin with deliberate ceremony. Robert Miller was a tall, imposing man with graying hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to judge everything they landed on. He wore the authority of leadership like armor, his voice carrying across the mountain air as he called out, "Samantha Parker, come out here. We need to talk." Samantha stepped onto the wooden porch, leaving the door slightly ajar so she could hear Lily if the child called for her. Ethan remained inside, but she could feel his presence just behind the threshold, ready to act if needed. "Mr. Miller," she said evenly, "what brings you up the mountain? You know damn well what brings me here." His voice was hard, accusatory. "Word has spread through Pine Ridge about your house guests." Behind him, the 2 other men shifted uncomfortably. She recognized them as farmers from the valley, good men who had been swept up in Robert's rhetoric of fear and suspicion. "I'm caring for a sick child," Samantha replied simply. "The same way my grandmother cared for sick children from your village for 40 years. "That was different," Robert snapped. "Your grandmother didn't harbor enemy warriors. She didn't bring trouble to our doorstep. Ethan Blackhawk is not a warrior, and his daughter is not an enemy. She is a 3-year-old child who was dying." One of the men behind Robert, a younger farmer named Tom, looked uncertain. "Maybe we should just—" "No." Robert cut him off with a sharp gesture. "This ends now. Samantha, you send them away, or we'll do it for you." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire. Samantha felt her grandmother's courage flowing through her veins, the same quiet strength that had allowed the old woman to stand up to men like Robert for decades. "I won't abandon a child," she said firmly. "Not for you. Not for anyone." Robert's face flushed red with anger. "You're putting the entire village at risk. When more of them come looking for their missing warrior, when they see you've given him shelter, what do you think will happen to Pine Ridge? The same thing that's been happening for years. Nothing. Because most people, regardless of their heritage, just want to live in peace and care for their families." "You naive fool," Robert spat. "Your bleeding heart is going to get innocent people killed." From inside the cabin came the soft sound of Lily's voice calling for Samantha. The sound cut through the tension like a bell, reminding everyone present of what this confrontation was really about. A sick child who needed care. Samantha's resolve hardened. "I suggest you ride back down to the valley, Mr. Miller. There's nothing for you here but a woman caring for a child, the same way any decent person would." Robert's eyes narrowed, but something in Samantha's unwavering stance gave him pause. After a long moment, he turned to remount his horse. "This isn't over," he called back as they prepared to leave. "The whole village will hear about this, and when trouble comes, it'll be on your head." As the 3 men rode away, Samantha remained on the porch until they disappeared into the valley. Only then did she allow her shoulders to sag slightly, with the weight of what had just transpired. Behind her, she heard the cabin door open. Ethan stepped out, carrying Lily in his arms. The little girl reached toward Samantha with both hands, and the simple gesture nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Mama," Lily whispered. the word carrying more meaning than any sermon she'd ever heard. That evening, as Lily slept peacefully in Samantha's arms, Ethan sat by the fire whittling a small wooden toy, a horse that was taking shape under his skilled hands. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with a quiet understanding that had grown over the past few days. "She called you Mama," Ethan said softly, not looking up from his work. Samantha's hand still on Lily's back. "I heard. Does that bother you?" She considered the question carefully. "No, it should, maybe. But it doesn't." Ethan set down his knife and looked at her directly. "I need you to know something. What you've done. There are no words in any language for this kind of gift. You don't need to." "Yes, I do." His voice was firm, but gentle. "You saved her life. More than that, you gave her something I couldn't. A mother's love when she needed it most." Samantha felt tears prick her eyes. "She gave me something too. Purpose. Hope." Meanwhile, down in Pine Ridge, Robert Miller paced the length of his modest home's main room. His daughter Emily, a girl of 16 with her father's determined chin but softer eyes, watched him from the kitchen doorway. "Papa, you're wearing a hole in the floor." Robert stopped, running a hand through his graying hair. "That woman up the mountain is going to bring trouble to our door." "What woman?" Emily asked, though she had already heard whispers around town. "Samantha. Parker. She's harboring a native warrior and his child, feeding them, caring for them like their family." Emily frowned. "Isn't that what Christians are supposed to do? Care for those in need? It's not that simple, Emily." Robert's voice carried the weight of old fears, inherited prejudices that ran deeper than logic. "You don't understand the history here. The conflicts, the bloodshed. That was a long time ago. Papa, not long enough." He resumed his pacing. "My father lost his brother to a raid. My grandfather fought in wars that have nothing to do with a sick child." Robert stopped again, this time studying his daughter's face more carefully. There was something different in her expression, a questioning he hadn't seen before. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me," Emily challenged. "Explain how caring for a dying child makes someone our enemy." The question hung in the air like smoke. Robert opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. The certainties that had guided his life suddenly felt less solid, less righteous in the face of his daughter's simple logic. Back at the cabin, Samantha was putting Lily to bed when the little girl spoke again. "Mama, where's my other mama?" Samantha's heart clenched. She looked to Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. "Your other mama had to go away," Samantha said gently. "But she loved you very much, and now you have me and Papa, and we love you too." Lily seemed to consider this, her small fingers playing with the edge of her blanket. "Will you go away too?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Samantha found herself making a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. The confrontation with Robert had shown her how precarious their situation was. The village's fear and prejudice ran deep, and she was caught in the middle. A woman of mixed heritage caring for a native child, defying every social boundary Pine Ridge held sacred. But looking down at Lily's peaceful face, feeling the solid presence of Ethan nearby, she knew she would fight for this newfound family with everything she had. Outside, the mountain wind carried the scent of coming winter, and with it, the promise of harder days ahead. A week passed in fragile peace. Lily grew stronger each day, her laughter now filling the cabin as she played with the wooden horse Ethan had carved for her. Samantha found herself smiling more than she had in months, watching the little girl explore every corner of the small home with the curiosity of a healthy child. But their sanctuary was about to be shattered. It began when Mrs. Henderson refused to sell Samantha supplies at the general store. "We don't serve those who consort with savages," the shopkeeper declared, loudly, ensuring every customer heard. The words cut deep, but Samantha held her head high as she left empty-handed. The hostility spread like wildfire through Pine Ridge. Dr. Williams, who had once called upon Samantha's grandmother for herbal remedies, now crossed the street to avoid her. The baker who used to smile and wave from his window turned his back. When she passed, "They're shutting me out," Samantha told Ethan that evening as they sat by the fire. Lily was asleep in her arms, thumb in mouth, completely unaware of the storm brewing around them. "Maybe we should leave," Ethan suggested quietly. "Find somewhere else." No, the word came out harder than she intended. "This is my home, my grandmother's home. I won't be driven away by fear and ignorance." Ethan studied her face in the firelight, even if it means danger for Lily. The question hit its mark. Samantha looked down at the sleeping child, her heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. They wouldn't hurt a child, wouldn't they? Before she could answer, they heard horses approaching, more than 3 this time. Samantha moved to the window and felt her blood run cold. Robert Miller had returned with nearly a dozen men, some carrying torches despite the early evening light. "Stay inside," she told Ethan, handing Lily to him. "Whatever happens, keep her safe." She stepped onto the porch to face the crowd. Robert sat tall in his saddle, flanked by familiar faces from the village, men she had known all her life, now looking at her like she was a stranger. "Samantha Parker," Robert called out, his voice carrying the authority of a man who believed himself righteous. "By the power vested in me by the citizens of Pine Ridge, you are hereby ordered to cease harboring enemy combatants on our land." "This is not your land, Robert," she replied firmly, "and they are not combatants. They are a father and his sick child, a child who will grow up to raid our homes, kill our families." The words came from Tom, the young farmer who had seemed uncertain during their first confrontation. Now his voice held conviction born of others' poisoned whispers. "Like I did," Samantha challenged, "like my grandmother did for 40 years. Of healing your children. That's different," someone called from the back. "You're half white." The words stung because they revealed the ugly truth. She was accepted only as long as she denied half of herself, only as long as she remained alone and grateful for their conditional tolerance. "I won't abandon them," she said simply. Robert's face hardened. "Then you leave us no choice. You have until sunset tomorrow to send them away. If they're still here after that, we'll remove them ourselves. And if I refuse," Robert's paw stretched too long, and in that silence, Samantha heard her answer. These men, her neighbors, were prepared to use violence to maintain their fragile sense of safety. "Don't test us, Samantha," Robert said finally. "We've been patient long enough." As the group rode away, their torches flickering in the growing darkness, Samantha remained on the porch. Behind her, she could hear Lily stirring, calling softly for her mama. The price of compassion, she realized, might be higher than any of them could pay. That night, sleep eluded them all. Samantha sat by the window, watching the valley for any sign of returning torches, while Ethan cleaned and checked his hunting rifle, the only weapon he carried. Lily, sensing the tension, stayed close to Samantha's side, clutching her wooden horse. "I should go," Ethan said quietly as dawn broke over the mountains. "Take Lily and leave before they come back." "Where would you go?" Samantha asked. "Your people are days away, and she's still recovering. Better than staying here and putting you in danger." Samantha turned from the window to face him. "You think I can just let you walk away? Let her disappear from my life like she never existed?" The pain in her voice stopped Ethan cold. He saw then what he had been too focused on survival to notice. Samantha wasn't just caring for Lily out of duty or kindness. She loved her completely, desperately, the way only a mother could. "She's not just your daughter anymore," Samantha continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's mine too." Meanwhile, in Pine Ridge, Emily Miller stood at her kitchen window, watching her father pace the yard like a caged wolf. She had seen this restless energy before. It always preceded his most reckless decisions. "Papa," she called, stepping outside. "Can we talk?" Robert looked up, his face showing the strain of a sleepless night. Not now, Emily. I have work to do. What work? Terrorizing a woman who's done nothing but help a sick child. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Emily's voice rose, surprising them both. You're so consumed with old hatred that you can't see what's right in front of you. Robert's jaw tightened. You don't understand the dangers. I understand that you're becoming someone I don't recognize. Emily stepped closer, her voice softening. Mama wouldn't have wanted this. She always said we should judge people by their actions, not their blood. The mention of his late wife hit Robert like a physical blow. Margaret Miller had been the gentle voice of reason. In their home, the one who had taught Emily compassion and understanding. How long had it been since he had asked himself what she would think of his actions? Your mother never had to face what I'm facing, he said weakly. Didn't she? Emily challenged. She married you despite your father's objections because you were poor. She faced down the town gossips when they said she was marrying beneath her station. She knew what it meant to be judged unfairly. Back at the cabin, Father James arrived unexpectedly, his weathered face grave with concern. The elderly priest had served Pine Ridge for 20 years, and his presence always commanded respect. Samantha, he said, dismounting from his horse. I came as soon as I heard. Father, she greeted him with relief. Thank you for coming. The priest looked around the modest cabin, taking in the domestic scene. Ethan teaching Lily how to stack wooden blocks, Samantha preparing herbal tea. The peaceful normalcy that contradicted every fearful story circulating in town. May I? He gestured toward the door. Inside, Father James watched as Lily ran to Samantha, wrapping her small arms around her legs. The love between them was unmistakable, genuine, beautiful in its simplicity. Robert Miller asked me to come, the priest said quietly. He wanted me to convince you to send them away. Samantha's shoulders tensed. And will you? Father James smiled, reaching out to pat Lily's head as she looked up at him with curious eyes. I've been a priest for 40 years. Child, I know love when I see it, and I know which side of this conflict our Lord would choose. For the first time in days, Samantha felt a spark of hope. The sun was setting behind the mountains when Robert Miller's ultimatum deadline arrived. Samantha stood on her porch, Lily in her arms, watching the familiar group of riders approach. But this time, Father James stood beside her, his presence a silent declaration of where he stood. Robert, the priest called out as the men dismounted. I was hoping we could resolve this peacefully. This doesn't concern you, Father, Robert replied. Though his voice lacked its usual conviction, his eyes kept drifting to his daughter Emily, who had defied him by riding up with the group, her face set with quiet determination. A child's welfare always concerns me, Father James replied calmly, as it should concern all of us. Behind Robert, some of the men shifted uncomfortably. Tom, the young farmer, looked particularly troubled as he watched Lily peek shyly around Samantha's shoulder. The deadline has passed, Robert announced, but his words felt hollow even to himself. You were warned. Papa, stop this. Emily dismounted and walked toward the cabin. Look at her. Really look at her, Emily. Get back. Here. But his daughter ignored him, approaching Samantha and Lily with gentle steps. Hello, sweetheart, she said softly to the little girl. What's your name? Lily. The child whispered, then added with a bright smile. This is my mama. The simple words hit the gathered men like stones. Here was no enemy warrior's child, no threat to their safety. Just a little girl who had found love in the arms of a woman who had lost everything. From inside the cabin, Ethan appeared in the doorway, his rifle nowhere to be seen. Instead, he carried the wooden horse he had been carving, a more elaborate piece now, clearly meant as a gift for Lily. I know what you see when you look at me, he said, his voice carrying across the yard. You see war paint and raids, blood and revenge. But I'm just a father who loves his daughter, a man who watched a stranger save her life when I couldn't. Pretty words. One of the men called out, but his voice cracked with uncertainty, not words. Truth. Ethan stepped fully outside, holding up the carved horse. This is what I am. A father who carves toys for his child, who sings her to sleep when she has nightmares about losing another parent. Is that so different from any of you? Robert felt something breaking inside his chest. He looked at his daughter, saw the disappointment in her eyes, and remembered Margaret's voice. Judge people by their actions, not their blood. This is our land, he said weakly, the fight going out of him. No, Father James said firmly. This is God's land, and he calls us to love one another, to care for the orphan and the widow, to welcome the stranger. Tom, the young farmer, suddenly. Step forward, Robert. I can't do this. She's just a baby. Tom. No. My own daughter is barely older than her. If she was sick and dying, I'd want someone like Samantha to save her. No matter what anyone else thought. One by one, the other men began to lower their weapons, their faces showing the same internal struggle Robert was fighting. They had come, prepared for a confrontation with enemies, but found only a family trying to survive. Lily chose that moment to wiggle out of Samantha's arms and run toward Emily, offering her the wooden horse Ethan had carved. For me? Emily asked, kneeling to the child's level. Lily nodded solemnly. Papa made it. He makes things for people he likes. Robert watched his daughter accept the gift, saw the tears in her eyes as she hugged the little girl who had become the center of this storm. In that moment, all his certainties crumbled. The breaking point had come, but not as he had expected. The confrontation ended not with violence, but with Robert Miller's quiet retreat. He remounted his horse without another word, his face etched with the confusion of a man whose worldview had just shattered. Most of his followers dispersed, but Tom lingered, helping Emily back onto her horse. I'm sorry, the young farmer said to Samantha, for all of this. That night brought an uneasy peace to the mountain cabin. Lily slept soundly, exhausted from the day's excitement, while Samantha and Ethan sat by the dying fire. It's not over, Ethan said quietly. Men like Robert don't change their minds overnight. Maybe not, Samantha replied, but his daughter reached him today. That's something. 3 days passed in relative quiet. Emily Miller had begun making daily visits to the cabin, ostensibly to check on Lily's health but really to escape the tense atmosphere at home. Her father had grown withdrawn, spending long hours staring out at the mountains, wrestling with doubts he had never allowed himself to feel. On the fourth morning, everything changed. Samantha woke to find Lily's bed empty. The blanket was still warm, suggesting she had only recently gotten up. But the little girl was nowhere in the cabin. Lily, Samantha called, stepping onto the porch. Lily, where are you? Ethan emerged from the small barn where he had been tending to their horse. She's not with you. They searched frantically around the cabin, calling her name. Lily was an obedient child who never wandered far without permission. Fear began to creep into Samantha's voice as they expanded their search to the surrounding woods. Someone took her, Ethan said grimly, studying tracks in the soft earth near the cabin. 3 horses, unshod, not from Pine Ridge. Samantha's blood ran cold. Your people, a rival band. They've been pushing closer to this territory for months. Ethan's face was grim. They wouldn't approve of this arrangement. What arrangement? A white woman raising a native child. A warrior living in peace instead of fighting. He shouldered his rifle. They see it as weakness. Betrayal. The irony was bitter. While Pine Ridge had finally begun to accept their unlikely family, other forces had emerged to tear them apart. By midday, news of Lily's disappearance had reached the village. Emily arrived first, tears streaming down her face when she learned what had happened. We have to find her, she insisted. This is our fault, Tom said, arriving with several other villagers. If we hadn't made such a fuss, drawn so much attention, Robert Miller arrived last, his face haggard with sleepless worry. He had ridden hard from Pine Ridge, And for the first time since the crisis began, his hostility was completely absent. "How many took her?" he asked Ethan directly. "Man to man, 3, maybe 4. They have several hours head start." Where would they go? Ethan studied the mountain peaks. "North, toward the old sacred grounds. It's where they would take her to. Decide her fate." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Everyone understood that Lily's mixed heritage, her adoption by a white woman, would be seen as contamination by traditionalists who viewed any accommodation with white settlers as betrayal. "I know those mountains," Robert said quietly. "I can guide a search party." Samantha looked at him in surprise. This was the same man who had threatened to drive them away just days before. "Why would you help us?" Robert's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the pain of a father who had almost lost his own daughter's respect. "Because that little girl called you Mama, and any child who has found a loving home deserves to stay there." For the first time since Jacob's death, Samantha felt truly understood by someone from Pine Ridge. The prejudices that had divided them seemed insignificant compared to a child's safety. The rescue party assembled at dawn, an unlikely alliance of former enemies united by a common purpose. Ethan led the way, his tracking skills guiding them through the treacherous mountain passes. Robert rode beside him, his knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable. Behind them, Tom and 3 other villagers followed, their faces grim with determination. Samantha had wanted to come, but Ethan convinced her to stay behind with Emily and Father James, in case Lily somehow found her way back to the cabin. "She'll need her mama when we bring her home," he had said, and the certainty in his voice was the only thing that kept Samantha from collapsing with worry. The trail led them higher into the mountains than any of the Pine Ridge men had ever ventured. The air grew thin and cold, and the rocky paths became increasingly treacherous. But Ethan pressed on with single-minded focus, reading signs in the wilderness that were invisible to the others. "There," he said, pointing to a distant ridge where smoke rose from a small fire. "They've made camp." Through Robert's field glasses, they could see the group for native men and, heartbreakingly, a small figure sitting beside their fire. Even from this distance, they could tell it was Lily by her distinctive blue dress. "How do we approach them?" Robert asked. "Do we fight?" Ethan shook his head. "That would put Lily in more danger. These men believe they're protecting her from corruption. We have to make them understand that she has already found her true home. And if they refuse to listen, then we fight." Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Samantha paced like a caged animal. Emily tried to comfort her, but nothing could ease the terror that gripped her heart. This was worse than losing Jacob. At least then, she had been powerless against illness. Now, her daughter was in the hands of people who might see her love as something evil to be purged. "Tell me about her," Emily said softly, trying to distract her. "How did you know she belonged with you?" Samantha's eyes filled with tears. "The moment I held her, it was like my body recognized her before my mind did. She fit perfectly in my arms, like she had always been meant to be there." "That's how Mama used to describe feeling when I was born," Emily said. "She said love doesn't follow bloodlines. It follows the heart." High in the mountains, the rescue party had crept as close as they dared. They could hear voices now, and Ethan's face grew increasingly troubled as he listened to the conversation in his native tongue. What are they saying?" Robert whispered. "They're debating whether to take her north to their main camp," or Ethan's voice trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Or what? Or to leave her here in the wilderness. They believe that if she's truly meant to survive, the spirits will guide her back to her people. If not, the implication hit the rescue party like a physical blow. These men weren't planning to harm Lily directly. They were planning something potentially worse, abandoning a small child in the unforgiving mountains to die of exposure. "We end this now," Robert said, checking his rifle. But Ethan held up a hand. "Wait, there's another way." Before anyone could stop him, Ethan stood up from behind their cover and walked openly toward the fire, his hands visible and empty of weapons. The 4 men around the fire immediately raised their rifles, shouting commands in their native language. Lily looked up at the sound of her father's voice, her face brightening with hope and relief. "Papa," she cried, starting to run toward him. One of the men grabbed her arm, holding her back. Ethan stopped walking, his hands still raised, and began speaking in calm, measured tones. From their hiding place, the Pine Ridge men could only watch and wait, their hearts pounding as a father fought for his daughter's life with nothing but words. Ethan's voice carried across the mountain clearing, speaking in the ancient tongue of his people. Robert strained to understand, catching only fragments. But the passion in Ethan's words was unmistakable. The leader of the rival band, a scarred warrior named Walking Bear, responded with harsh accusations, even without understanding the language. Robert could hear the contempt in his voice. Lily stood between them, her small hand reaching toward her father, tears streaming down her face. "He's telling them about Samantha," Tom whispered, having picked up some of the language from trading encounters, about how she saved Lily's life. Walking Bear spat on the ground, his rifle still trained on Ethan. He spoke rapidly, gesturing angrily toward Lily, then toward the distant Pine Ridge Valley. "What's he saying now?" Robert asked urgently. "He says," Tom's face grew pale, "he says the child is already corrupted, that she has drunk the poison of the white world and can never be pure again." Ethan's response was immediate and fierce. He stepped forward despite the rifles pointed at him, his voice rising with the authority of a man who had nothing left to lose. From their hiding place, the Pine Ridge men watched as something shifted. In the confrontation, one of the younger warriors lowered his rifle slightly, uncertainty crossing his features. Walking Bear noticed and barked a sharp command, but the young man hesitated. Ethan continued speaking, and now his words took on a different quality, not anger, but something deeper. He knelt in the dirt before the men, his arms spread wide, in a gesture of complete vulnerability. "Papa," Lily cried out, breaking free from the man holding her and running to her father's side. Walking Bear raised his rifle, but the young warrior who had hesitated suddenly stepped between them, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. The 2 men argued fiercely while Ethan held Lily close, his body shielding her from the weapons. "We have to act," Robert said. But before he could move, another voice cut through the mountain air. "Enough." An elderly native man emerged from behind a cluster of rocks, walking with a slow dignity of advanced age. He wore traditional clothing, mixed with modern elements, and his presence immediately commanded respect from all the warriors. "Grandfather Elijah." Tom breathed. "He's their spiritual leader." The old man approached the fire with measured steps, his keen eyes taking in every detail of the scene. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decades of wisdom. Walking Bear immediately lowered his rifle, bowing his head respectfully. The other warriors followed suit, their aggressive posture melting into deference. Elijah studied Lily, who looked up at him with curious eyes, no longer afraid. When he knelt before her, she smiled, the same trusting smile she had given Samantha the first day. The old man spoke to her in gentle tones, and she responded in the few native words Ethan had taught her. A smile creased Elijah's weathered face, and he looked up at Ethan with something that might have been approval. "Your daughter speaks our language," he said in heavily accented English. "But her heart speaks the language of love. This is more powerful than blood." Walking Bear protested angrily, but Elijah silenced him with a raised hand. "I have seen this woman you speak of," the elder continued. "In my dreams, the spirit showed me a mother's love that transcends the boundaries men create. They showed me a child who would bridge to worlds." He stood slowly, his decision made. "This child belongs where love dwells, and love dwells in the heart of the woman who saved her life." The pronouncement carried the weight of spiritual authority that even Walking Bear couldn't challenge. Reluctantly, the warriors stepped back, their mission ended by the wisdom of Their elder daughter, the journey down the mountain was unlike anything Robert Miller had ever experienced. Grandfather Elijah rode beside them, his weathered hands gentle as he helped Lily sit comfortably on Ethan's horse. The old spiritual leader had insisted on accompanying them back to Pine Ridge, saying the spirits had more work for him to do in the valley. "Tell me about this woman," Elijah said to Robert as they navigated a narrow trail. "The one who mothers a child not born to her." Robert found himself speaking honestly for the first time in years about Samantha Parker. "She's complicated. Mixed blood, like her grandmother was." The old woman was respected. "But Samantha," he paused, searching for words. "People fear what they don't understand. And do you fear her?" The question cut straight to Robert's heart. "I did. I feared what she represented. Change. The breaking down of boundaries I thought kept us safe. And now," Robert watched Lily chattering happily with her father, completely unaware of the danger she had been in. "Now I think maybe those boundaries were keeping us from something beautiful." Meanwhile, at the cabin, Samantha sat by the window, her hands working mechanically on a piece of mending while her eyes never left the mountain trail. Emily dozed fitfully in the chair beside her, having refused to leave despite Samantha's gentle insistence that she should go home. Father James had brought food from the village, an unexpected gesture that spoke to how the crisis had changed people's hearts. "Mrs. Henderson sent this," he had said quietly, unpacking fresh bread and preserves. "She wanted you to know she's been praying for Lily's safe return." The same woman who had refused to serve Samantha just days before was now praying for her adopted daughter. The transformation seemed impossible, yet here was the evidence. As the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon, Samantha heard what she had been listening for: the sound of multiple horses approaching. Her heart stopped for a moment before she recognized Ethan's voice calling out to her. She burst through the door and onto the porch, her eyes searching frantically until she saw her. Lily sat in front of Ethan on his horse, alive and unharmed, her face lighting up when she spotted Samantha. "Mama," Lily called out, struggling to climb down before the horse had fully stopped. Samantha ran to meet her, catching the little girl in her arms and holding her so tightly that Lily giggled and protested she couldn't breathe. Through her tears, Samantha looked up to see the rescue party dismounting: Robert, Tom, the other villagers, Ethan, and an elderly native man she didn't recognize. "This is Grandfather Elijah," Ethan said, helping the old man down from his horse. "Lily's great-grandfather, and the one who made her safe return possible." Elijah approached Samantha slowly, his ancient eyes studying her with careful attention. When Lily squirmed to be put down and immediately took both their hands, trying to pull them together, the old man smiled. "So," he said in careful English, "you are the woman the spirits spoke of." "Spirits?" Samantha asked, confused. "They showed me a vision of healing, a child who would teach the peoples that love knows no color, no blood, no boundary. They showed me you." Emily appeared beside them, having woken at the sound of voices. "Lily, oh, thank God you're safe," as the little girl hugged Emily enthusiastically. Robert dismounted and approached Samantha. The transformation in his face was remarkable. Where once there had been suspicion and hostility, now there was something that looked very much like respect. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "Several of them, actually." Samantha shifted Lily to her hip, the child's arms wrapped securely around her neck. "We all have things to learn, Mr. Miller." "Robert," he corrected gently. "Please." As the sun set over the mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin yard, an unlikely group gathered around Samantha's humble home. Former enemies united by love for a little girl who had taught them all what family really meant. 3 months had passed since Lily's rescue, and Pine Ridge had slowly transformed into something no one had imagined possible. The change began with small gestures. Mrs. Henderson had personally delivered supplies to Samantha's cabin with a quiet apology. Dr. Williams had asked for her help with a particularly difficult case involving poisonous plant exposure, acknowledging her grandmother's inherited knowledge. But the most significant change came from an unexpected proposal. Robert Miller stood on the small platform outside the town meeting hall, addressing a gathering that included both villagers and several native families who had traveled from the surrounding mountains. Grandfather Elijah sat in the front row, Lily curled sleepily in his lap while Samantha and Ethan stood nearby. 3 months ago, Robert began, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. I stood on a mountain ready to drive away a father and his sick child because I was afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of losing control, afraid of admitting I might be wrong. He paused, his eyes finding his daughter Emily, who nodded encouragingly from her seat. That little girl taught me something I should have learned long ago, that love doesn't recognize the boundaries we create. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice, commitment, and care. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some faces showed approval, others uncertainty, but all were listening. That's why I'm proposing we establish a neutral ground, Robert continued. A place where both our peoples can meet, trade, share knowledge, and help each other. A place where children like Lily can grow up understanding that they don't have to choose between worlds, they can bridge them. Tom stood up from the audience. Where would this be? Robert gestured toward the foothills between Pine Ridge and the mountain territories. There's good land there, with fresh water and shelter. We could build something together, not a white settlement or a native camp, but something new. Grandfather Elijah rose slowly, shifting Lily to Samantha's waiting arms. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of decades. This proposal honors the vision the Spirit showed me. A place where healing can happen, where old wounds can finally close. He looked directly at Robert. But it will require sacrifice from all of us. Are your people ready to see us as neighbors instead of enemies? Some are, Robert answered. Honestly, others will need time. But we have to start somewhere. Father James stood up from his seat. The church supports this proposal. Christ taught us to love our neighbors, and that means all our neighbors. Over the following weeks, the neutral ground began to take shape. Families from both communities contributed labor and materials. Samantha found herself at the center of it all. Her healing knowledge needed by everyone regardless of their heritage. One afternoon, as she watched Lily playing with children from both communities, Ethan approached her with a question that had been building between them for months. Marry me, he said simply. Samantha looked at him in surprise. Ethan, not because of convenience or for Lily's sake, he continued. Because somewhere in the midst of saving my daughter, you saved me too. Because I love you. Because we're already a family in every way that matters. Before she could answer, Lily ran up to them, covered in dirt from playing. Mama, Papa, come. See what we built. She grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward an elaborate structure made of sticks and stones that the children had constructed together. It was neither a traditional native dwelling nor a white settler's home, but something entirely new, a fusion of both traditions that somehow worked perfectly. It's beautiful, Samantha said, and she meant it, like us, Ethan said quietly, squeezing her hand as the sun set over their new community. Samantha realized that this was what healing looked like, not the erasing of differences, but the celebration of what could be created when those differences came together in love. 1 year later, the neutral ground had grown into something magnificent. What had started as a simple meeting place had become a thriving community where both cultures not only coexisted but flourished together. Houses built in hybrid styles dotted the landscape, and children's laughter could be heard into languages throughout the settlement. Samantha stood in the doorway of her new home, larger than the mountain cabin, but built with the same loving attention to detail. The walls were lined with her grandmother's healing herbs alongside Ethan's carved artwork, creating a space that honored both their heritages. Today was special. Today, Lily was turning 5, and the entire community was gathering to celebrate. But more than that, Today marked the anniversary of the moment that had changed all their lives. The afternoon, when a desperate father had carried his dying daughter to a stranger's door. "Mama, look." Lily burst through the door, her arms filled with wildflowers picked from the meadow. She wore a dress that Emily had sewn for her, combining traditional native beadwork with practical frontier styling. Like everything else in their new world, it was a beautiful fusion of traditions. "They're lovely, sweetheart," Samantha said, accepting the bouquet. "Did you pick them all by yourself?" "Papa helped, and so did Grandpa Elijah and Emily." Lily's excitement was infectious. At 5, she moved seamlessly between languages and cultures, calling Grandfather Elijah by a native title while referring to Emily as her big sister. Without any sense of contradiction, Ethan appeared in the doorway behind their daughter, his arms loaded with lumber. "The new schoolhouse is almost finished," he announced. "Robert says we'll have it ready by autumn." The schoolhouse was another miracle of their community, a place where children would learn both native wisdom and settler skills, where two ways of seeing the world would be preserved and celebrated rather than forced into competition. "And the teacher?" Samantha asked. "Emily has accepted the position. She says she wants to learn as much as she teaches." As the afternoon celebration began, Samantha found herself standing in the same spot where Robert had once confronted her with threats and ultimatums. Now he was teaching Lily how to whittle, his patience infinite as her small hands struggled with the knife. Father James had performed their wedding ceremony 6 months ago, combining Christian vows with native traditions in a service that had drawn people from dozens of miles around. Some had come out of curiosity, others out of skepticism, but all had left touched by the obvious love that bound their unusual family together. "Penny for your thoughts," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they watched the celebration. "I was thinking about Jacob," she admitted, "about how losing him led me to find Lily. How pain can transform into something beautiful if we let it. Your grandmother would be proud of what you've built here." "What we built," Samantha corrected, leaning back against his solid warmth. "All of us, across the meadow." Lily was now teaching the other children a clapping game she had learned, her voice rising above the others as she counted in both English and her father's native tongue. She moved between the children with the unconscious grace of someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere, who carried the best of both worlds in her heart. As the sun began to set over their thriving community, Grandfather Elijah approached them, his ancient face creased with satisfaction. "The spirits are pleased," he said simply. "The vision is complete." Samantha smiled, watching as Robert's grandson tottered over to play with Lily, as Mrs. Henderson shared bread with a native elder, as Emily laughed at something Tom had whispered in her ear. This was what the future looked like, not the victory of one culture over another, but the creation of something entirely new and infinitely precious died in her arms. Lily yawned sleepily, the excitement of the day finally catching up with her. "Mama," she whispered, "tell me the story." "Which story, little one?" "The one about the sick little girl and the lady who saved her." "That story," Samantha said, kissing the top of her daughter's dark head, "is just beginning." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next story.